Good morning. My name is Michelle Ward, and I'm from the Texas A&M College of Veterinary Medicine and Biomedical Sciences. And today's video conference is going to be Anatomy and Physiology, brought to you by the Partnership for Environmental Education and Rural Health. We are funded by the Science and Education Partnership Award at the National Institutes of Health. And today we have Dr. Larry Johnson speaking to you on Anatomy and Physiology. Dr. Johnson is a professor at the College of Veterinary Medicine, and he teaches histology, which he'll tell you all about in just a minute. Dr. Johnson, take it away.
Thank you. Welcome. We want to talk to you a little bit about anatomy and physiology today. And we'll get going with our first slide. As Michelle said, I am a professor at Texas A&M University in the veterinary school. I teach undergraduate students, graduate students, and sometimes veterinary students as well. So we want to define the words anatomy and physiology. What is anatomy? Anatomy is the study of structure of things, the structure of things, where physiology is the study of function of things, maybe mechanical function, physical function, biochemical function, function of living things. And here we can see, if we want to look at the anatomy, we can see a specimen that I brought here for you. This is a dog. We call him Shorty because his legs are a little short. If you look inside there, we can see the anatomy. We can see the stomach here. We can see the liver. We can see the heart. We can see the brain. We can see the spinal cord going back through there. We can see the different parts of anatomy of this dog. This side we can see the skin of the dog, but over here we can see the sides inside.
What did you bring from lunch? You want to get a picture?
So, the anatomy.
Did you text her?
So the anatomy, here's anatomy of a horse. We can't see you guys, so I hope you can see us. But this is what a horse can do with his anatomy. I don't know if you've ever seen a flying horse before, but a horse using their anatomy, their muscles and their bones, were able to jump a fence like this. So that's the, so anatomy would be the horse, what's inside, and the function would be using that anatomy. Now there are different fields in anatomy. There's macroscopic or gross anatomy, and those are the things you can see with your naked eye. And see, we can see those things of this body world parts of the horse and also of the man. Microscopic anatomy, which is where I work, is the structure of tiny things that you see under a microscope. And here we can see a cell with its nucleus and the green Golgi apparatus, but various organelles inside the membrane, which is yellow there on the outside. So cytology is the study of cells. Histology is the study of the four basic types of tissue that we want to talk about today. And so we see those. It's very interesting how the whole body could be categorized into four different parts, four different groups of cells, tissues. One is epithelium, as we see there. One is connective tissue. Wonder what connective tissue does? It connects, that's right. We also have muscle tissue, and then also we have nervous tissue. So the whole body could be subdivided into these four different types of tissue. Now, protoplasm is living substance, and the cell is the smallest unit of living substance, and tissues are groups of cells with the same type of function, like nerve or muscle. And in French, the word texture means tissue. And so whenever the early explorers were looking, they were stuck their hand in the brain, and they discovered it's different than touching muscle. And so it had a different texture, and that's why they gave them the name tissue, because it had different textures associated with it. And so tissue, and then we have organs or more than one tissue, and then more than one organ makes an organ system. So today, right now, we're talking about tissues, and later we'll talk about the organs. So epithelium, one of the things it does, it covers organs. It's the outside of organs, and also it's the inside of your blood vessels, inside of your stomach, inside of your lungs. So it lines viscera, lines blood vessels, and it's secretory cells. It's the cells that produce secretions, salivary glands, tears in the eyes. All those are epithelial cells. Now, epithelium has a lot of function. One is absorption, and it does that in the intestine. One is secretion. Your pancreatic juices are secreted there. One is transport in the eye, and endothelial cells of the blood vessels is that they transport nutrients from the blood out to the tissue. Also, it's involved in excretion in the kidneys. Protection against dehydration and mechanical damage. That's what the skin does for us. Also, it's sensory. You can sense pain. You also have taste buds. You smell things. And so you have different sensory organs too. All those are epithelial cells. So here we can see epithelium actually line the lungs. So the air spaces in the lungs there have epithelial cells lining them. Also in the upper right hand side, the pink, we see blood vessels. You can see the red blood cells going through. Those two are endothelial cells that line the blood vessel there. If you look into the lung, you can see the black stuff in through there in the lung. Those are macrophages down below. Macrophages, and on the far right you can see one of those cells, and this is from a smoker. So you have a lot of debris inside your lungs, inside the air spaces there, the macrophage, which collects up debris. And the next slide illustrates a smoker's lung versus a non-smoker's lung, and we can see those here in a little slide that well, not a slide, but this is a real piece of tissue where this is a non-smoker and the smoker. A smoker's lung is quite black with tar, and the macrophages that are inside there are holding tar and debris associated with the smoking. So connective tissue, as I mentioned, it connects things. It's the histologic glue that attaches things. It's around your muscle, it's around your nerves, as well as it's the fat cells, and also it's the bones. All that is connective tissue. And here we can see a little connective tissue. This is from a horse. This is a stifle joint of a horse, and we can see the ligaments here, which attach muscle, bone to bone, as opposed to tendons that attach muscle to bone. And so you can see this is a connective tissue. Another piece of connective tissue we see there, this is the foot of a horse, and we can see the bones inside there. Bone is connective tissue. And at the end of the bones you have cartilage, and the cartilage is connective tissue as well. So if we see that in a person, we can see that the fat cells are connective tissue. And here we see an individual that's 130 pounds versus 300 pounds. And you see the deposition of the fat cells, which you see on the upper left-hand side, are deposited around to make that individual weigh more. So the actual parts of a person is about the same. It's just a lot more fat around in the skin is where it's mostly located. Now, connective tissue is also blood vessels, and we have blood vessels and the blood cells that are in the vessels. Connective tissue. The red blood cells, they carry oxygen, carbon dioxide. Oxygen to the tissue, carbon dioxide from the tissue. Also, there's white blood cells. And here we see a white blood cell. There are neutrophil. And we also see platelets. So platelets clots the blood whenever it happens. You see red blood cells, lots of red blood cells in through there. But the white blood cells are just temporary. They just go into the blood and then go into the tissue where it does its function. Now, if we see blood is very valuable to the medical profession for diagnostic purposes. And the reason a doctor takes blood is he wants to try to figure out what's wrong with you. And so by looking at the cells that are in the blood, you can tell if you have a bacterial infection, do you have a parasitic infection, do you have a viral infection. Different cells would be elevated in concentration in the blood. And also it follows the course of the disease. Are you getting better? Are you getting worse? And then to evaluate the effectiveness of treatment. And here we have some blood that we collected this morning from one of our donor goats that provided this blood. I don't know if you can see it. The fluids at the top and the red blood cells are along the length and through there. So this is some blood that we got, and of course the blood has the white blood cells and the red blood cells, and the white blood cells are just right above the red blood cells. You've seen maybe on a pimple, or maybe whenever a red ant had bitten you, where you see the white structure, that's the white blood cells that you see that making that white. And so if we move to muscle, muscle generates contractile force. That allows us to move, is what it does. It has a high concentration of contractile proteins, actin and myosin. So they're arranged in a certain way that allows muscles to work very efficiently. In fact, contractivity is a fundamental property of protoplasm. Remember I said protoplasm was living substance? And so a fundamental property is its ability to contract. But muscle cells has really adapted to convert chemical energy into mechanical work. And locomotion of beating hearts, the movement of tissue, all that uses different types of muscle. And here we can see skeletal muscle is the main muscle that we see that you usually eat whenever you're eating pork chops or something. There's also cardiac muscle that is in the cardiac muscle is a small cell as opposed to a bigger cell for skeletal muscle. And the smallest one is the smooth muscle cells. See in the top in the middle is the smooth muscle cells. So there's three different types of muscle cells, and they do different functions. There is another type of muscle, and that's the myoepithelium, and we can see it here on the bottom right-hand side where it makes a net around a sweat gland down in through there. And also you can see it at the top in the eye. This is the dilator muscle. Those are myoepithelial cells in the eye. Now if we go to nervous tissue is specialized for transmission, receiving, and integrating electrical signals. That's what it does. You guys are receiving signals now. Neurons are very excitable cells. They're large cells, and they have long processes. Axons, maybe, which are the projections of the nerve cells, they interact with other axons to talk to other nerve cells, or they also may talk to muscle to direct the activity of the muscle. So basically what nerves do is their communication. That's the important function of them. Maybe they're in their brain and the spinal cord, and they reach all the way from the spinal cord down to the bottom of your foot. So it's really long processes, some of which may be a meter in length. So you have a cell body that has the main parts of the neuron, where the nucleus is, And then you have long projections that go out to the end, to the nerve terminal, and that's where it ultimately does its work, either interacting with other nerves or it's going to be interacting with muscle cells itself. So back to the four basic types of tissue. Remember we talked about epithelium, connective tissue connects, muscle tissue contracts, and nervous tissue has communication. So here we're going to see a dog, and this is another little dog that we have. We call him Slice because you could slice him. Don't do this to your dog at home. But here you can see the brain, you see the tongue, you can see the nasal cavity, the sinus here, and a little bit about the trachea coming in through the bottom. And so what we want to do is to look at the different portions and to see those in this dog Slice. So first of all, we're looking at epithelium. So where is epithelium? Well, there's epithelium in the skin. That's what you see of your neighbor is the epithelium. The epidermis, the outside of the skin, is epithelium. There's also epithelium in the eye. There's epithelium in the tongue, covering the tongue. There's also epithelium in glands. That's a salivary gland that we see there. If we look at connective tissue, there's connective tissue in the skin. The dermis is connective tissue. There's connective tissue in the bone. Bone is connective tissue. There's connective tissue surrounding nerves and surrounding muscle. There's also connective tissue in teeth. Teeth is connective tissue as well. Muscle. We see the big muscles at the top of a dog's head that lets him bite very strongly. We see muscles at the neck to let him move. We see muscles, there's muscles in your tongue. You can move your tongue around, right? Also, there's muscle in your hair. You've maybe had chill bumps when you get cold or something, and that's muscles that are doing that. There's nervous tissue. Of course, the brain is nervous tissue. There's nervous tissue regulating secretions. There's nervous tissue in the eye. That's what you were able to see with nervous tissue. And there's nervous tissue in the tongue. You have taste buds, right? You're able to taste things. That's nervous tissue as well. And also we have another specimen. This one is a dog that's cut a different one away. And we can see here, we can see the two different lungs. We can see the heart here, the spinal cord. And so we can see the different parts. We can see the two chambers of the heart as well. So if we look at these, and we look for our four basic types of tissues again, we can see epithelium is the skin on the outside, the epidermis. Connective tissue is a rib. You can see a rib there, and then the muscle would be the heart, and nervous tissue is a spinal cord. We can also see these in humans too. This is from the body whorls. You can see in the horse, you can see epithelium, where the individual has his skin removed. You can see muscle, where the muscles walked out of a skeleton. You see connective tissue skeleton, and also see nervous tissue as well. Now there's different fields of study. There's different fields which are study of the structure of the body. There's surface anatomy, there's applied anatomy, so maybe kinesiology, maybe radiological anatomy. Different things here that physicians use whenever they're trying to diagnose what's wrong. There's also developmental anatomy, and here you can see the heart, where it starts out with just a cell, the heart, the blood runs straight, and then the blood coils, and then the blood swirls around as it does in the adult heart. All this is developmental anatomy. There's also neuroanatomy, which studies the nerve cells at the microscopic level to figure out how they go and how they function and how they myelinate. So before we were talking about tissues, now we're going to organs. And one of the organs is skin. We call that integument. And an organ is something that has more than two or more types of tissues involved. So if we look at the skin, you got the epidermis, which is really epithelium, the outer layer. You got the dermis, which is connective tissue below. And then we have the hypodermis, where we have mainly the fat cells that we saw before. So the function of skin is to protect you against injury and desiccation. You are in an incubator because you're in your skin. It maintains a water balance. It also excretes substances as well. Thermal regulation. Without skin, we would be very cold, or we cannot regulate our temperature. And also it receives stimuli. You can tell if the room is hot, you can feel pain, and you can feel pressure. All those are the skin, as well as the skin is a basis of recognition. It gives you clues. You can look at a person and determine the age of the person by looking at their skin, or relative age. You can also, in the skin itself, where you have the fat, it's where you have the hypodermis is located in there for energy storage, for metabolism of fat. So all that is functions of skin. Now as we go inside the skin, we can see the musculoskeletal system. In the muscle, there's three different types of muscle. There's smooth muscle, skeletal muscle, and cardiac muscle, as we mentioned. And there's bones as part of the skeletal musculoskeletal system. And we see there are long bones, which are what we stand on, or our legs. There's flat bones in our skull, irregular shaped bones in our spine, and short bones like in our ear, for example. And so here we can see there's joints where the bones go together. There's cartilage around the bones. Here you can see where the cartilage is. And then there's ligaments that attach bone to bone. And then we'll have tendons which attach muscle to bone. And here we can okay. And here we can see some of those structures. Again, this is connective tissue, but this is also a ligament. Ligaments that holds this, and in this particular joint, this locks down like this so that the horse can sleep standing up because his leg is locked in there, and it's brought about by all these ligaments there that hold this piece there. Here you can see the cartilage around the bone so that one bone does not touch the other bone. Cartilage touches cartilage. And we can see a similar type thing on this horse's foot. If you look here, you can see the bone in through there. There's another bone, and it has cartilage around the edge. So whenever it bends, the cartilage is touching cartilage and not the bone. Another thing about bone is if you look in here, you see the bone is hollow. That inside there is where bone marrow is on the outside. And the bone's on the inside, you have compact bone on the outside. So you look like you may think the bone is solid, but it's not. And one of the functions of bone is for it to house hemopoietic tissue to make, and you can see where the red blood cells and the white blood cells will be produced in that tissue inside of the bone. So there are different types of muscle. I mentioned skeletal muscle is involuntary. It's voluntary. You control it. It's a large cell. Cardiac muscle, involuntary. You can't tell your heart to beat faster. You can make it beat faster by running, but you can't tell it to. And smooth muscle is the smallest one. So the smallest one, it doesn't branch. The cardiac muscle does branch. Is at different types. So here we see some movement. Whenever a thing's muscle contracts, it moves and it holds your posture, makes you sit upright. Joint stability is one of the things, and also like the heat production is another thing that happens. And here we see an individual. You got flexion, where you have the angle, closed angle of the joint, and then you got extension. So here we can see it on a horse. So which is which in this horse? Which one is flexion and extension? You're right. This one is flexion, and the front legs are extended out for that horse to land. So here the function of cartilage. Cartilage is connective tissue, and here you can see it kind of in blue in the lower right-hand side there, where it's touching the It's so preventing bone from touch bone. One thing about cartilage is it has no nerves, and so it has no pain. So whenever you compress, when you jump or whatever, you compress your cartilage, it doesn't hurt because there's no nerves in there. Cartilage is also found in your ear and the respiratory tract, and it allows it to slide very easily. It cushions the joints is what it does. And then we have bones. The function of bone is to protect the enclosures, also to support land animals. You can imagine an elephant would have big bones that would facilitate holding the weight on land. Also, it's involved in calcium regulation. Calcium is regulated in the body, and digesting or laying down bone regulates that. Also, hematopoiesis, the formation of blood cells, occurs inside the bone marrow, in the hole of the bone that we saw a while ago. If we change our gears a little bit to the immune system, the immune system protects us against foreign invaders. And here on the right-hand side, you see a host of invaders. We have worms, we have protozoa, we have fungi, bacteria, and viruses. So there's a lot of things that would like to take up residence and live in us or on us. And the immune system prevents that. Also, it protects a germ-free environment. Here in the bone marrow, where we make the blood cells, we need to have a sterile environment. And so the immune system continually getting rid of bacteria to help maintain and produce a germ-free environment inside our body. And here we can see some of the types of things that would like to live in us. Here's HIV, there's viruses, fungi, E. coli, protozoa, and different ones that are ready to get you. Actually, they're just looking for a home, just like you are doing. And if you want to combat infection, there's three basic things, and you probably already know these things. One is you want to break the cycle of transmission. One, you want to kill the infective agent. And then you want to increase the host immunity. Those are the three things that we want to do to combat infection. So the skin is the first line of defense. That's breaking the cycle of transmission. Bacteria don't come in as readily if you have skin. If you think about someone is a burn victim and has lost their skin, how prone they are to infection. You can see that they have to live in a kind of semi-sterile environment because they don't have the first line of defense. They're not breaking the transmission of infection is the problem that they're doing. The next component is to kill the infective agents. And that is, not only is the skin, but also in your stomach and also in your intestines. All of those are lined up to break the transmission. The other thing is you kill the infective agents. And the neutrophils that we see there, there's three neutrophils at the top of that slide there. You can see them right here, those three. And there's also macrophages. Now the one in the middle there is a monocyte that gives rise to a macrophage. But you see over here on this man where there are different macrophages throughout the body. There's some in the liver and the brain, in the skin, all over different parts of the body, and all those are to kill the infective agents. And here you can see some neutrophils and macrophages reaching out to kill the green bacteria. They even send out their long pseudopodia to get them if they need to. Now, the other component is you want to increase the host resistance, is what you want to do. Immunity is acquired. You don't have it to start with. You have to acquire it, and it's very specific. You develop your immunity to the bugs that you are exposed to, and also it has memory. It remembers a previous exposure, so it can mount a response, a secondary response, much better than the first response. So all those relate to increasing host resistance, which is what we want to do. Here we see the organs of the immune system. There's primary organs, there's secondary organs. The primary organs produce the cells, and the secondary organs have the cells in contact with the antigens is what we have. And so there's two types of main cells that are involved of the lymphocytes. There's the T-lymphocytes that are either helper cells, suppressor cells, killer cells, and then there's also the B lymphocytes, which produce plasma cells that produce antibodies. So you either have the cells themselves attacking, which is what the T cells do, with a little gun there, or you have the antibodies, the products of cells attacking is the antibodies that we see. So here we see a T lymphocyte, a little small cell attacking a tumor cell, a big tumor cell. And so you can see the action of a little cell killing a big tumor cell, which once we have tumor cells, the immune system recognizes that as non-self, as the invader, even though it's our cells that are become cancerous, and the lymphocytes kill those as well. And so here we have a lymph node as one of the things. Also, we have tonsils. So the tonsils, as soon as we eat something, we're exposing our body to pathogens, bacteria, viruses, and things. And the tonsils are located there to help protect the throat, the oral cavity and the throat against bacteria. We also have the thymus, which produces T lymphocytes, and we have the spleen, which cleans the blood. Now we have invaders of the body. Here we can see a domestic pin, like a straight pin or something. And if you look at that with higher magnification, you can see that there's bacteria on there. And if you look at the bacteria on the self, you can see that they have structure too. So as you go to higher magnification, you can see those. So when you stick a pin in you, you are actually inoculating yourself with bacteria. And on the right-hand side, we see some bacteria inside a sweat duct. So in your skin, you have sweat glands, and you have a sweat duct that goes to the surface. And so what happens is the bacteria get inside the duct. So when you wash your hands, you are not able when you wash your hands, you're not able to get the bacteria out of the sweat ducts. So maybe you've worked with a feedlot before and make your hands dirty, come back and you wash your hands, but even though you wash your hands, you then smell them and you still smell the feedlot. That's because the feedlot is still on your hands because you can't wash it off. As a consequence of that, whenever someone's doing surgery, they have to use gloves. That's why a surgeon washes their hands nicely to get the bacteria they can off, but to prevent the bacteria in the sweat glands and the sweat ducts, they have to wear gloves to prevent spreading infection whenever they do surgery. And so, in conclusion, we talked about anatomy and physiology, the 4 different types of tissue, a little bit about the fields of immunology, as well as the skin and the muscular system. Today we talked about, this is part 1, we're also, in 2 weeks, we'll have part 2 of anatomy. We'll talk about other organs, and this is time for some questions maybe.
We have a couple of sites that are interactive. Do we have out there the Career Center East from Louisville ISD, Mrs. Jones's class? If you guys can unmute your mic, if you'd like to ask some of the questions that you guys submitted, or I could ask them for Dr. Johnson if you would like.
As earlier they were talking about how the connective tissue, if you didn't have the connective tissue...
If you would like to ask one of the questions, you can unmute your mic and ask the question.
Between your epithelium, your skin, and your muscles, your skin would just flop around, because that's what the connective
Looks like you're trying to.
It connects it to the
While you're
muscles.
working on that, I'll go ahead and ask a couple of these questions that you submitted. First question, Dr. Johnson, from the Career Center East in Louisville, Texas. How many cells make up the human body?
Well, the number of cells in the human body is 10 to the 7th.
10 to the 7th.
How many zeros? 10 to the 7th, so like 10 million.
Okay.
Can you hear us now?
we
This is Pearson Center
use
East.
the
Can you?
HeLa cells at Texas A&M University, and you might want to describe or say what those cells are.
The HeLa cells are cells that were cancer cells that were obtained from a patient that had cancer in the 1940s. And those cells are immortalized in that they retain the ability to continue to divide. And so, yes, we use those cells in cell culture because they don't terminate and die. They keep dividing, and so we grow viruses in them. So in order for us to be able to come up with experiments on how to kill viruses, we need to have a source of viruses to kill. And so we grow them in those HeLa cells.
Okay, that was a great question. Here's another one. Do you think that since the appendix is a vestigial organ, that it will slowly disappear from human anatomy?
Well, that's a good thought that organs that are not useful will ultimately disappear in the evolutionary scheme. That is true. However, the appendix is not a non-useful organ. The purpose of the immune system interacting with bacteria all along the digestive tract, including in the appendix, is for the immune system to react to whatever bugs are there. Because I mentioned to you that the immune system is specific for whatever things you're exposed to, and in the appendix, the different types of pathogens that are there are telling the immune system how to react, and so it's still useful. It's not non-useful.
Okay, great. We have some other interactive sites. Do we have Chiefland High School, Miss Weingart, or Mast Academy in Miami, or Pleasanton Intermediate? If you guys can unmute your mics, you could ask a question. I also have some more submitted questions from some of these schools. Okay, well, I'll go with a couple of questions that were submitted by Mr. Fowler's class. And first question, Devin asks, why do single cells collect to form tissues and organs? In other words, what drives a single cell to form a multicellular organism?
Okay, interesting question. When the cells are developing into the organs or the tissues that there are, the different cells have receptors on the surface. The proteins on the surface allow one cell to recognize another cell to combine to make a tissue. Remember, multiple cells makes tissue, and then multiple tissues makes an organ. And so it's the proteins on the surface of cells that allow cells to identify each other, to come together to make the tissues and organs.
Also from Pennsylvania, from that same class, Sky asks, if cells reproduce, then why can't we grow back an arm or a leg?
Well, what happens in our arm and our leg is that all the cells have the same amount of DNA, the same DNA as other cells. That's true. But what happens is cells become differentiated. They develop from a primitive pluripotent state where they can make any type of cell to a specific one, like going to make a hair follicle or make a tube or something. They become differentiated. And when they're differentiated like that, they lose their ability to turn on the DNA that has the information for them to make a leg or arm. And so only during the embryo phase was that information turned on. And then that information is turned off. So with differentiation, you turn off the things you don't normally use. So if you cut off a leg, you can't replace it because the memory is not accessible to the cells to make another leg.
That's interesting. One of these questions from Louisville was similar to that, and it says, can a heart muscle repair itself?
Yes, a heart muscle can repair itself. The problem is if you're having a heart attack, it takes a long time to repair, and it usually doesn't repair fast enough before you're dead. Or it doesn't repair fast enough before you become somewhat dysfunctional. What happens whenever heart cells die, they're replaced immediately with connective tissue, which doesn't contract. But they can replace themselves over a period of time, but it's a slow process, too slow for the immediate needs of the oxygen demand that the body has.
That's interesting. This is a question that's good, especially for if you're a 6th grade in Texas studying prokaryotes and eukaryotes, and I actually was really interested in finding out the answer to this question. Kaylin in Mr. Fowler's class, and this is from Pennsylvania, asks, in my science class we've been studying eukaryotes and prokaryotes. I know that eukaryotes' control center is in the nucleus, but what about the prokaryotic organism? What is their control center?
Well, of course, both the eukaryotes and the prokaryotes have DNA, and the DNA is going to be controlling the activity of the cell. In the case of the eukaryote, it's all packaged in the nucleus, and you have that for efficiency because you've got all your DNA in it together. You can unwind certain parts and not other parts very well controlled. Now, eukaryote cells are larger, and so diffusion of things through would be a problem if you didn't have precise control with a more efficient system with the nucleus. So the prokaryote has the DNA, has the control, it's not packaged in the nucleus, and it's less efficient. Smaller cells are required. You can't have a big prokaryotic cell. You can have a big eukaryotic cell because the nucleus can control things in a way that makes the cell efficient to be able to get nutrients and get rid of waste from the sides.
That's interesting. Would you say it's kind of like a small schoolhouse versus a large high school type thing, that they still have the same types of controls, but they have to be a little bit more organized the larger the organism or the cell gets?
Right. If you've got a smaller school, maybe one principal is good, but if you've got a big school, you might have various social associate principles as well, involving a big process, or if you had a big cell like a eukaryotic cell.
Okay. Here's one from Morgan. Do cells always work together? Can they work alone? And can they even work against each other?
Well, the answer to that is all the above. Cells work together, related to the first question, how the cells come together to make a tissue or organ. Well, they're obviously working together. And it's the proteins on the membranes that allow one cell to recognize another cell with which it can work. Do they work separately? They can. Can they work independently? Yes, they can. Like a red blood cell is independent of other red blood cells. It's going to carry oxygen and carry carbon dioxide, just as the chemistry is working in the cell independent of other cells. Of course, we have multiple red blood cells, each working independently. Now, can they work opposed to one another? Yes, they can. The immune system opposes cancer cells, and so they oppose bacteria. And so cells can oppose one another. Also, if you think about a tadpole has to lose its tail and then grow legs. So you've got cells killing other cells that will facilitate development of the legs of a tadpole into a frog.
Very interesting. I think there's one more question, and this one is about hair. Why is hair a dead cell? Why doesn't it stay living? What kills it? And if it's dead, how does it actually grow? And this is from Destiny in Pennsylvania.
Well, of course, the hair itself is dead. Hair is a product you see of cell division from the hair follicle. So inside the skin is a follicle of growing cells. That's not dead. That's alive. And so as cells are added up to one another, they differentiate. They come from a regular cell to something that just has filaments inside. And so the hair is not one cell, it's multiple little small cells that ultimately are projected out from the follicle and are on the outside. So they're exposed to the air, they would dry out, and they're already differentiated. So they're dead because they don't have organelles, don't have a nucleus anymore, and they're that way so they can resist combing and wind blowing your hair and things. But the follicles inside there are still alive, and sometimes there's hair. Hair can have different life cycles. For example, your eyebrows is a short life cycle. It falls out, but it's replaced because you got other follicles that are there. But scalp hair is very long. You might have seen some females with hair all the way down to the floor. It could be a real long life cycle of the follicles that produce the hair. So the follicles themselves are alive. The hair is a product of the division of the cells in the follicles that are already differentiated. When it's differentiated, it no longer can divide, doesn't even have the organelles or nucleus to do so.
Ah, good answer. Great. Well, I'd like to thank you guys for joining us today. Remember that we are the Partnership for Environmental Education and Rural Health at Texas A&M University. If you're interested in seeing a recording of this presentation, you can go to our website, which is peer.tamu.edu, click on videos and video conference recordings. We also have other recordings of videos there if you'd like to see those. And we are funded by the Science and Education Partnership Award. Thank you very much, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you.